I am talking with Jeff Yohalem. Jeff is an award-winning writer and an incredibly interesting fellow who, as it turns out, is a fan of the Guild, which really makes me happy. And you're in charge of Far Cry 3. You did Assassin's Creed 2, and I really want to talk with you about story in games and sort of how you see games going as an artistic experience and a narrative experience for players. So first off, I don't view Far Cry as a first-person shooter game, but everybody else on the internet does. So is Far Cry 3 a first-person shooter game, and if not, why not?
Well, Far Cry 3 is a first-person shooter, action-adventure, open-world game. And so that's obviously a huge mouthful, but it's kind of like Assassin's Creed in first person, in a sense that you're exploring this island and there's all kinds of things that are pulling you away from the main story, which are part of the main story, and then you're going to be running missions and meeting interesting characters. And so I think it is very different than any other first-person shooter experience out there. However, you are a guy with a gun, and rather than letting that be kind of veiled, you know, where it's like you're killing space aliens or you're killing zombies or whatever, or you used to every year you kill like 1,000 people, so this is just a typical like month for you. I wanted the player to be a participant in the game rather than just a ghost, and so the protagonist, Jason Brody, enters this island without having shooting experience, but the player does. Especially if the player's played other first-person shooters.
Yeah.
And so I wanted this kind of dialogue between the two of them, you know, where the player is good at shooting or is just picking up a shooter for the first time, and Jason's journey reflects that. And so over the course of the journey, the player is transforming Jason into something else through the gameplay loop, and the player's being affected by the gameplay loop because you shoot people, you gain experience. With experience, you can buy tattoos in the game, which are part of the narrative, and transform Jason into a warrior on his quest to recover his friends.
So for the player, it's like, look, it's a shooting game, so you're like, yeah, I sniped that guy, or like I love those moments where I sort of like silent kill somebody in Assassin's Creed,
exactly,
or whatever. Like, but these are things I find abhorrent in real life. So the player's having a great time. How does the character feel about all that stuff?
Well, that's what's so interesting about this, that I think in the past writing kind of gets in the way of the game, especially because writers have the reaction that you have, which is like, oh, I want to be morally responsible, and I feel like killing these thousands of people is wrong, but that's the central mechanic of the game, and players just love it. They love the fun of that. And so I'm going to pretend like it doesn't exist and write around it and figure out ways to kind of sweep it under the rug.
Yeah.
And I think what that ends up doing is then the player feels like the writer's getting in the way of the fun and is kind of trying to like lecture.
Yeah.
And so I basically wanted to create a story that was all about that, about what you're talking about, that feeling of uneasiness, where you're killing all of these people, but are they people and with lives, and what does it mean that I'm enjoying it? And so throughout the game, the characters you meet will be talking to both the player and to Jason, and sometimes to one or the other. And Jason is kind of horrified, too, at moments by the player's actions. And so that's why it's like the player is a character in the game, because Jason is reacting to the things that the player makes Jason do. And so, and Jason, for example, in open world, he's got this quest to save his friends, right? But there's the open world with all these enticements, which are part of the game design that entice the player, oh, let's go find an artifact over here, let's go do this over here. And so Jason gets sidetracked from finding the friends because he's being attracted by things in the world. And so that's part of the story. I mean, everything that's going on in the game itself is being put under the microscope, and hopefully players will emerge from it having learned something about their own desires and drives in a video game. So that's going on in the game, this kind of dialogue about what's happening to society and how is Gen Y affected by this, and how does the player and Jason get out of that rabbit hole, and then and that's kind of how the game relates to Alice in Wonderland, because Alice in Wonderland was a critique of British society at the time, disguised as a children's story, and so there's some of that going on. And so there's all these different layers of meaning, and I think players will get to put together pick and choose what happens, but to me, then they aren't wasting their time, because if I put enough ideas in this and really challenge players' expectations, then they'll constantly then they'll look at their own world and they'll say, what's going on in my life that I've taken for granted? And I feel like that's my job, that they come away from the game not having wasted time. For me, it's just sizes of jigsaw puzzles. That's how I always think about it. And it's a jigsaw puzzle that I put together over a year, and I'm constantly fiddling with pieces. And if it's a blockbuster, the jigsaw puzzle is just that much bigger because, if I were doing an indie film, I could get away with just that message and just do like some weird David Lynch thing where like at Mulholland Drive where it all dissolves and it's really interesting. But you can't do that in a blockbuster. And so what it means is there's just more layers. And so you have a main plot, which is personal about Jason's relationship with his family and friends, and that's real. And you'll experience all of that, and we have incredible motion capture. It's facial and body simultaneously, and actors were all performing in the same room together.
How much time do you spend with your actors? I was going to ask you about that, because it's really interesting to me. With a game that is so narrative heavy, you need good actors to bring these characters to life. How much time do you personally spend with writers? Like, how heavily invested are you in that particular process?
Very invested, and once we cast an actor, I really watch the actor's performance and talk with the actor and adapt my writing to that actor. And at the same time, we had a film director working on the cinematics direction,
Awesome.
An indie film director, and so it was very well done. We had a lot of rehearsals before shooting the motion capture, and I think the performances are incredibly natural because of that, and I hope raise the bar in terms of what's possible in a performance. And because it's full body motion capture, I can write lines of dialogue that mean one thing but say another, and that's a new thing for video games, because in the past facial expressions weren't clear enough. So as a writer, you got told constantly, like, you'd write a line like, can you pass me that jar? And what the character really means is, I've had a terrible day, and just give me the jar so I can have one thing go right. And that won't be conveyed because the facial isn't there, and it's just through spoken. And so what'll happen is then a director will say, could you change the line to, I just had a really terrible day? And so then you get a line that's on the nose, where there's no, for me, story is a game, and players should be constantly trying to figure out what characters mean by what they're saying. And then that game just disappears. And so story is just this heavy, dead object that's like inserted in the middle of the game itself.
You could write in any medium. Why did you choose video games?
Growing up, I had these profound experiences with video games where I felt like the best games, it was as if I was having a conversation with another person, with the designer, I guess. But the game felt warm. A lot of games feel cold. And those are very depressing for me. Like, when I play a game that feels cold, I end up feeling very bummed out for the rest of the day, like I wasted my life. And so that feeling that I didn't want anyone to ever feel like they've wasted their time, coupled with the fact that when I play a game that's warm, like something like Journey, it really has this incredible emotional resonance that I think is more powerful than any other medium.
So writing in games, then you get an opportunity to express those same ideas just in a different medium.
Well, maybe in a more powerful way. Like, I've been really fascinated by this thought. It's just a thought experiment that I do right now because I can't actually try it. But I felt like if you told you took 20 kids who have lakes behind their house and have winter each year, so the lakes freeze over. So you have the parents tell the kids that, like, archetypal story about, the kid who falls through the ice and dies. And then you have another 20 kids who the parents sit them down in front of a game and they experience falling through the ice and dying. And I would wonder how many of those kids, if you then follow them over the next 5 years, how many of them fell through the ice? And I would hope that the kids who played the game are less likely to do it. Because I think that the biggest challenge facing society as a whole is that each generation learns a lot of stuff. You learn through living, and all this stuff happens to you, and then you have a kid, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna tell you what I learned, and you're gonna get it. And then the kid's like,
you can't do it. I know this being a parent. The whole video game experience is really applicable to parenting, because you have to let your kids grind levels.
It's like if I get in there and I'm like, you shouldn't be killing, and don't headshot that person, then it's like players go, what are you talking about? This isn't what the game is about. I'm headshotting people and having fun. So Far Cry is about, it's like, go have fun, and let's see how you feel at the end of it.
With Far Cry, you're doing a lot of really deep, meaningful things. Does it worry you at all that the audience isn't going to get that?
No, it doesn't at all. Writers want people to feel their complex emotions.
Yeah.
And so they force people into cutscenes or into some situation where it gets in the way of the gameplay, and then they're like, and then they get mad because people are like, I want to shoot people in the head. Can I mute this?
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, then if I want to do stuff like that, I'll make a movie. A game is about interactivity first and foremost. So my test of the stories that I create is always if I can mute the story, whatever's going on with dialogue or anything, and I get the point just by playing the game all the way through, then it's conveyed what it's supposed to convey. And so once that happens, which has happened with Far Cry, I'm very happy with it, and I hope players like it. But I'm fine with letting players who just want to explore the fun of the island and explore the fun of killing and that kind of stuff, you know, that they've had in other shooters. They can go do that, and I think we've pushed the bar in a lot of things, and we're better than other shooters. I hope. I feel that way, but it's up to players to decide.
Have you announced a date when the game will be on the street?
The game is being released September 4th.
Awesome.
So I'm really excited for everyone to play it.
Great. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you.